Part 2. My audio is awesome, but Sony Vegas sucks. Also, theology and stuff.
As I said in another video before this, seeing is not believing. You can't just see God and then say, oh yeah.
Well, why not? That would seem pretty reasonable. If I saw God, then I really wouldn't have a choice but to believe that it was there, unless I thought, it's a hallucination or something like that. In the Santa Claus movies that exist out there, faith is always presented as a very good thing, and doubt is bad. In the movie The Santa Claus with Tim Allen, he says, I don't believe what's going on here. I see it, but I don't believe it. And then the elf says, well, seeing isn't believing, believing is seeing. And the same rhetoric spouted here in a movie about Santa Claus, which we all know Santa is not real. So if that's the level that we're dealing at, I think we have a major problem here in you saying that there's evidence when in fact there isn't any evidence. You just have to believe it.
You gotta believe in him first. Does that make sense? No? I'll break it down for you. Allow me to digress. Having faith in God, building a relationship with him and reading the Word, anybody who's read the Word and has a relationship with God can tell you about things in their life that have happened that most people and critics would say, oh, that's just a coincidence. Okay, here's one for you.
Well, this is circular because you're using the Bible to essentially justify the Bible, and you're also moving the goalpost because, again, anyone that's read this will do the following. But if somebody reads it and comes to a different conclusion, then you simply move the goalpost and say, well, you didn't honestly accept God in the first place, and by God, you now are referring to a particular God. Your God. You're not referring to a different God. You're referring to the God of the Judeo-Christian Bible, Yahweh. That's what you're referring to. You're not referring to some nebulous God, universal idea of God. You're referring to a very specific God. So, go look for the specific God that I have in mind, and you'll find it by reading the Bible.
My mom and I were arguing. I needed new shoes. The soles were coming off of them, and I had to go to school. They're flopping around. People made fun of me all the time. So it was getting on my nerves. So my mom said, oh, I'll pray. And I told her, God's not going to give you money to buy me new shoes. That's stupid. God's got bigger things to do. That's just dumb. So she said, you just watch. So she prayed for enough money to buy me a pair of shoes. And the very next day in the mail, there was a handwritten letter from somebody from 6 years before that we hadn't contacted, my mom hasn't talked to in years, sent money in the mail just as a thank you for changing their marriage and their life by talking about God with them almost a decade later.
That's very interesting, but we need a repeatable test on that. You see, it's not enough for that one single event to have happened to you. It's not really that impressive, by the way, because it's a person that might have given your mom money regardless if she prayed or didn't. You don't remember the misses, you only remember the hits. It's not a story if your mom didn't get the money the next day. That's a non-story that you wouldn't remember to tell. Yeah, my mom prayed for money, she didn't get it, so I didn't believe in God, so I'm still an atheist. End of story, I guess. Well, that's not very remarkable, but that's the ordinary experience that we would expect to usually happen. And for many people, that's exactly how it's played out. They prayed at one point for something, didn't get it, and that was it. They didn't believe in God, because God didn't give them the thing that they wanted. Read Langston Hughes' essay called Salvation, and you'll maybe walk away with a better understanding of what I'm talking about. Link to it will be in the description. The thing is, if you want to demonstrate God with this sort of prayer idea, Great, let's do it again. Pray for me, deconverted man, to get money in the mail the next day after you see this video. Any amount, 1 penny would do. That would be fine. It could be a letter that has, or even just an envelope that's completely blank and inside is a penny. I'll be like, you know, that would amaze me. I would be like, well, it happened, you know. But it's not going to. And you'll object to the idea that we need to test it probably by saying that you can't test God. So a prayer that can get answered 1 time by God cannot be replicated any amount of times other than that 1 time. So it fails to be anything interesting or impressive. If God would always give money every time it was asked for money, that would be interesting. Boy, that would be real useful. You know what? If your mom's still around, and I hope she is, because I know how that it can be, why not have her pray that the U.S. debt be paid for? That would be amazing. Like that the USA would just receive a check that would fix the national debt or something. Like, well, I don't know if it would be a check. I don't know how that would work. But that would be amazing. That would be unexplainable, especially if you could. It was like the money would be there somehow, but we wouldn't have any idea where it came. We just know it's ours and be like legal, and there'd be questions, but they'd be like, "Look, we paid the national debt off. That's what we were told to do with this money, so that's what we did. No more national debt. We're clear. We're at zero again. Woo! Wow! I don't know what that would do for America, but it would be amazing." But God won't do that. It won't. You could have the entire world pray for that to happen, and it won't happen. Because, well, God isn't testable. Why? Because if it was testable, you wouldn't need faith. You would have a test that you could conduct to be sure about God, and that would be seeing that God is there. Rather, you just believe that God is there to fulfill whimsical prayers that could have been fulfilled by humans anyways. Nothing extraordinary that we couldn't possibly explain except for admitting that God existed. God doesn't ever cure all diseases or wipe out starvation or end all wars. God doesn't do things that humans or nature could not do themselves. And God also doesn't respond to prayers in any testable manner, which means either God doesn't exist, or God doesn't care, and or doesn't have the power to do anything about it. Or, I guess you could throw in, God doesn't want to be tested because that would then prove that it exists, and that's bad because of reasons, I guess. But then that would negate your whole video, which is proof of God, see? So that's kind of a problem.
God gives you answers whenever you ask questions. So anybody that says, oh, that's stupid and things like that, listen, I'm not listening to people like that. I like lemon meringue pie. I've tried lemon meringue pie. If you have not tried lemon meringue pie and you want to give your opinion on what it tastes like, you're a fool.
Oh, my. You haven't tried it. See, that's the problem. You don't know if you like it until you try it. Well, I'm going to debunk that idea in full here, because this idea is just bad on its own, disconnected from the whole God belief. The idea that you don't know what X is like until you try it, so therefore your view or opinion on X is invalid unless you tried it. Really? Well, I know that I don't like being with guys in a sexual manner. I don't have to try it to know that I won't like it. I just know I won't like it. But if I was to accept this argument, then I would have to try it. Hey, try it! You don't know until you try it. I also don't need to know what doing drugs is like to decide I'm never going to try drugs unless they're prescribed to me by a doctor. I'm not going to try cocaine or rock meth or whatever the bleep is out there these days. I might like it. I don't know. I don't care. I don't want to try it. My opinion on it is informed by the scientific method that it's bad for you, let alone illegal, but it's bad. So I don't need it in my life. And I don't need to have tried it to have an opinion about it. So that debunks that silliness. Also, you don't know that death is that bad until you've tried it. What? I mean, you can only try it once, though. Well, you don't know what it's like to be shot unless you get shot. So you gotta get shot, and then you can talk about how bad it is to be shot. No, it's silly. It's incoherent. No. You don't have to try stuff to know whether or not you would like it, or to imagine whether or not you would like it, or to just object to trying it in the first place. We have tastes and preferences. It's just the way we are. Now, back to your claim. God will give you an answer if you ask a question. Oh, really? What do you mean by that? Because I can assume you mean a certain particular type of question that I would posit to God, and I would expect a very particular answer to it. Of course, if I did that, it's equivalent to the whole answer prayer repeatably test thing, because the question I would ask God would be, what is the solution to one of these unsolved mathematical equations that exist? What's the answer to any of them? It doesn't matter, just give me an answer to one of them. Obviously, I kind of need to know what the answer is to, because that would help me. Although maybe a mathematician would know what the bleep it is once I publish it. I would get a Nobel Prize for having the answer. Science would advance because of the answer. It would do who knows what for humanity because we would know the answer to one of these problems. It's something I could never figure out just on my own, because I don't even understand why those unsolved mathematical problems are unsolved, even though I have read that it's like, here's why, blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, that was words, I have no idea what you said, but okay. But you get a huge, insane prize, earth-changing, science-changing win for getting that answer. And if I received that sort of answer to that question, I would believe in God. Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. If I say, okay, God, give me the answer to one of these unsolved mathematical equations, just tell me which one it is, what the answer is, and we'll go from there. Thanks. And God just, boom, gave me the answer, which didn't happen, by the way. I didn't get any answer. Wait a minute, hold on. I'm receiving numbers. No, I'm not. No, I'm sorry. No, nothing. Nothing happened because, well, I wasn't sincere enough, right? Or, well, you're not allowed to test God. So God won't answer that sort of question. Do you mean God will say yes, no, or wait as an answer? Because that's as good as asking an 8-ball to answer a question. By the way, the first question I always ask any 8-ball is, does this thing work? And when it says wait, I'll try it again. And if it says no, well then obviously it doesn't work, so I put it down and grab a different 8-ball. But when it says yes, I'm like, oh, that's cool. Are you sure you really work? And I shake it again, and it'll say no, and I'm like, okay, well that one's junk. See, I need the one that says yes all the time. But that would be a repeatable test, and that would prove God. And we can't have proof of God because we have to believe in God. So I don't think that God really does answer any questions at all. But if you could clarify the matter, that would be great.
Don't tell me how the Bible's wrong if you haven't sought Him first to see if it's true or not.
There's many problems with what you just said, because you're saying, well, believe in God, seek God. By God, I mean the Judeo-Christian God, Yahweh, obviously. I mean Jesus Christ, that whole package. Then, after you believe in God, then you'll read the Bible and believe that the Bible is true, and then you will have tried it, and then you will know that it's true, I guess. Well, I don't have to actually have tried any of it to know that it isn't true. All I have to do is examine how it came together, which I don't think you've done. So I'm going to hold you to your own standards here of, if you haven't tried it, you can't speak on the matter. Have you looked at the history of the Bible? Have you looked at how it got assembled into canon? Who did that, when, and where, and why? What methodology did they use? Who wrote what, when, where? What were the original languages like, and what did they say? What's the oldest manuscript say? What's the Judeo system that they had in the time? What did the Jews believe about the Torah? Is the Torah different than the Old Testament? Spoilers, it is. Why? How did the New Testament come about? What are the theories behind that? What version of the Bible are you holding there, by the way? And who wrote it? And how? How did they translate it? How did they decide that that translation was a good translation? Who agrees with that translation? Who doesn't agree with the translation, and why? Do you know that history? Do you know the archaeological history of the places and people of the time? Is there any archaeology to support any of this? Do you know about any of that at all? If the answer to any of those questions is no, then you're not qualified to speak about the Bible, right? Because that's holding you to that standard. But the problem with all of that is you don't need to have looked at the evidence. You just believe the Bible. You're fine with believing in the Bible without any evidence at all, because you've already decided that it's true. You don't need to look at the evidence. You don't need to look at the history. You don't need to find out anything more about it. You don't need to know the culture or the people or the languages. You don't need to know any of that at all to believe.
Just saying. Try my way. Try it. I've tried your way. All y'all's way. I've tried them all. Try my way. See what happens.
Well, sir, I have tried your way, and I deconverted from that way because that way isn't a way to know if something is true. It's a way to just believe that something is true, and that's no longer good enough for me. I need to verify that it's true. But I challenge you that you haven't, in fact, tried my way, because you don't know what my way is. My way is to research into many of those things, if not all of those things that I mentioned before. The history of the Bible. Who wrote it? When? Where? Why? What's canon? And why is it canon? Who decided that? Where were they? Who are those people? Is there any archaeology to support these things or not? What's the history of it? What are the Jewish ideas of the Torah? Is the Torah different than the Old Testament? In what ways? How did the New Testament come about? Who wrote it? When? Where? Why? What are the earliest copies we know of? Where did those copies come from? Who found them? And where? And when? And why? And how did any of this come to be? What translation are you using? Who agrees with that translation? Why? How did they decide that that translation was good? What do people say about this in general? What do they say about it broadly? What do they say about it specifically? Who were these people, places, and times? Can I get any evidence of any of this? If you do all of that research, which I don't think you'll do any of, by the way, but I challenge you to do it, and you can give me a single bit of actual, tangible evidence that proves any of this is true, that would be kind of cool. You'll get a few kings and a few locations at best after doing all that. The rest you'll have to turn to apologetics to make excuses for why that evidence doesn't exist, and that's going to be the end of it. You're just going to find apologetic pages that give you arguments, not actual evidence. So, good sir, my challenge to you as I end this video is use my system, which is the following. Empirical evidence. That means evidence that we can verify with our senses or with our science. Repeatable test. Find one so that we can conduct it. Or a valid and sound argument. Produce one so that at least I have a reason to investigate further into your ideas. In this video, you offered none of those things. And because of that, I, and others that follow my system or something like it, have to be skeptical of your conclusions. Here again is a number of logical fallacies, circular reasoning among them, but thanks for the microphone. I can't say anything.